I've always loved a good story. I think most of us do. I always picture some of my favorite stories that I can remember as a kid was sitting around the campfire at a family farm in southern West Virginia, Elkins, West Virginia, and sharing stories and laughing and just enjoying time being together. And it's one of the reasons why I love the name of our church, Anthology Church. And so many people have asked, why Anthology? What sparked that name? Now, you may not know it, but I didn't know it. An anthology is actually a collection of stories. And that's kind of what community is, right? Each of us in here, we all have a story. We have a story in the past. We've got parts of our story that we love to tell, and it brings up laughter and it brings up fun when we get to tell those parts of the story. And we also have parts of our story that we want to hide. And we hope that people never find out, and we hope that we never have to tell. Right? Some parts of our stories are messy, some of them feel random, but all of us come together and we make up a collection of stories. And I think the best part of our story is found when Jesus steps into that story. I think when Jesus steps into your story, you start to see purpose and hope, maybe where there wasn't any before. And that's what this church is all about. It's the idea that your story matters. And honestly, I think that the best parts of those stories are found when we stop trying to write it ourselves and we start letting Jesus call the shots. We start letting Jesus take over the next part, the next chapter. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't just love a good story like the, hey, Jesus makes all the difference in the world kind of way, but I also love a story that just involves fun, like just random things from life that make us chuckle, right? A great example of this is how I've ended up being the dad that just loses his mind over a missing TV remote. Right? And I never thought I would be that guy, right? Growing up, I can remember growing up in Glen Burnie, Maryland, and my dad tearing the living room apart looking for this TV remote, and I'd just be like, Dad, what's the big deal? You could just walk up to the TV and hit the buttons, right? Like you remember that you used to be able to hit the TV, like the buttons on the TV. And I'm like, Dad, chill. Like it's not that big of a deal. You just hit the buttons. And now here I am, years later, 4 amazing kids that I would not change at all for anything. But I'm wandering the house like a man on a mission going, where the heck is the remote? Why didn't we put it back? We have a system, people, like this is where it goes. And my mind is frustrated and fixated, and I'm going to find this remote. And when I do, I am going to hide it so that none of you could ever use it again. Right? I've not actually done that, but I have really wanted to. And see, here's the deal. The urgency that I feel, the urgency that you feel, right? Maybe you have been there. The urgency that I feel when something is lost, that feeling of restlessness, that feeling of unresolved, that's where we're going today. And that's what I want us to talk about. You see, at Anthology, our mission is simple. It's this, that we exist to help reconnect people's stories to Jesus. That's the whole point behind this church. As Anthology exists to help reconnect people's stories to Jesus, especially people who maybe feel like they have wandered too far and find themselves wondering, man, I thought there'd be more to my story. I thought there'd be more than this. And maybe that's your story. Maybe you once felt close to God, but life happened, or religion hurt you, or you just drifted. But this church is being built for people who felt disconnected, people who've wondered if they still matter to God. And get this, in general, we are wondering about God. Get this, a recent Pew Research Center survey found that 83% of American adults believe in God. Right? That doesn't mean that they necessarily trust God. That doesn't mean that they love God. But that 83% of American adults believe that God in some form exists. Doesn't mean they have a relationship with him, but they believe that he exists. The problem is this. That same survey also found that 68% of Americans claim no religious affiliation. And so what we find out, what we discover is that we wonder about God, but we move on, right? And perhaps for good reason, because we've seen the way that so many church people act, or we feel that God has forgotten about us, because of a prayer that maybe went unanswered or some other thing in life that went sideways, right? Believing that God probably wants absolutely nothing to do with us, but life unfolds and things get crazy and we start to wonder, is there a God? And if there is, do I matter to him? Does he care about me? Guys, I believe that the answer with everything inside of me is yes, you do. You matter to God. And one of the things that I want you to hear very firmly here at Anthology is that disconnected doesn't mean done. Even though maybe you've disconnected your story to God, or maybe just because life has happened and now all of a sudden you feel disconnected, I want you to know that we believe at Anthology that disconnected doesn't mean done. Your story's not over. Your story has chapters ahead, and I believe Jesus helps make sense of where you've been and gives purpose to what's next. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to show you a story out of the Bible where Jesus demonstrates this. Jesus was so good. One of the things it says about Jesus is that he was never without a parable. And a parable is just simply a story with a spiritual point. And so Jesus was so good at taking these complex spiritual truths and making them simple. Not dumb. He's not dumbing it down, but he makes it simple so that we can understand. And so that's what Jesus does here, is Jesus actually, he tells a story to build to the point that nothing matters more to him than people getting reconnected to God. And so check out this story. It's in Luke 15 in your Bibles. We'll have it up on the screen. I'm using the New Living Translation this morning. And it says this, in Luke 15 verse 1, it says this: tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. Now this verse right here, we're just going to kind of chunk through this as we go. This verse right here ought to make us all pause and think through it a little bit, because there's a whole lot happening, and if we just breeze by it, we could miss it. And I want you to notice what it says. It lumps two groups of people together and it kind of puts them on the same plane. It says tax collectors and other, notice this, notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. Now they were all gathering around Jesus. Now essentially what's happening here is they're saying both of these are people that you wouldn't expect to find with Jesus. The tax collectors and other notorious sinners, these are descriptors, these are adjectives that they would use at this time to describe people. And it's not really something you want to be described as, right? I mean, we see notorious sinners, right? Like, we get that. We understand what that is. But what's going on here with the tax collectors is the tax collectors in this day and age, the way they would make their living is Rome was occupying Jerusalem here. They were occupying this area. And the way that the tax collectors would make their money is they would go and they would charge Rome's tax, and then anything they could charge on top of that, they could scrape. So essentially what they were doing is they were selling out their own people in order to make a living, and these tax collectors were rich. Right, so tax collectors, they got their own like special brand of sinning, right? You got notorious sinners, and then you got the tax collectors. And they're being highlighted like, hey, these guys were hanging out with Jesus. And it says often they came to listen to Jesus teach. And that was something that people noticed. And one of the things I want you to notice about this, and this is so incredibly important, whenever we read stories of Jesus, what pops up is that people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. And get this, Jesus liked them. People who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus, and get this, Jesus liked them. And that didn't sit well with the religious people in that day and age. Because notice what happens next in the story in verse 2. This, the fact that they often came and they hung out with Jesus, this made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating, get this, here it is again, with such sinful people, even eating with them. Right? I mean, it's even going like that extra mile to just like highlight, even eating with them. Here, one of the cool things here, see, the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious laws is whenever Jesus was teaching, they weren't too far off, because they started to get jealous of Jesus, because Jesus started to amass a people like following, because he was teaching about God in ways that people understood, and so people were flocking to Jesus, and that made the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the teachers of religious law, be like, hey, people should be following us, not this guy. And this guy, he hangs out with sinners. Like, what is going on? Really cool here, this word that's complain. All right, so originally this part of our Bible was written in what's called Koine Greek. It was like the trade language of the day, much like English is today. And that word there, complain, is actually literally translated to the word muttered, which I just think is fun, and I think we should bring back to the English language, right? They muttered against Jesus. This guy, he eats with sinners, like they mutter this. This guy welcomes sinners and he eats with them. And the implication from the religious people is this: Jesus, you're supposed to be hanging out with us. You're a religious teacher. You claim to be this great religious guy, and yet you never invite us religious people over for dinner. You claim to know God and want to teach us about God, but Jesus, you hang out with all the wrong people. You should be hanging out with us, not these misfits. You see, the religious people had started to prioritize people wrong. The Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law, they had decided who mattered and who didn't matter, at least who didn't matter as much. And so this scene is unfolding, and I think Jesus overhears them muttering. And then he goes into this. He realizes it's a teachable moment, and he jumps into a story, and he says this, starting in verse 3. He said, so Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep, and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that is lost until he finds it? Okay, now picture this scene with me. When you're listening to someone speak, you're evaluating what they are saying and begin to either agree or disagree as they are speaking. Right? It's happening right now. And so one of the things that you will do is you want to start somewhere where you think your audience will follow, right? Where they're agreeing with you. And so for us, this seems backwards. Right? If you're a shepherd and you've got 100 sheep, one of them goes missing, it would be like, well, I still got 99. Like, kind of let the one go. Okay, but to them, in their culture at this day and time, like they're an agrarian society, they totally get this. There are shepherds sitting in the audience. And so Jesus is telling this story, and I picture the shepherds in the crowd, like they start nodding their heads, like, yeah, that's what you do. I mean, one sheep really matters. And so if one sheep wanders off and you've got 99 in safety, like you leave the 99 until you go find the one. Like they're nodding along. Us, we're like, don't you just sacrifice the one for the 99? But to them, they're like, absolutely not. If the one goes missing and you know where the 99 are, you go find the one that is missing. That's what you do. You go look until you find it. In verse 5, it says this, and Jesus tells the story. He goes looking for the one that's lost, and when he, the shepherd, has found it, it says he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. And at this point in time, people in the audience probably start to go like, well, I don't know about joyfully. Right? this thing's dirty, it's muddy, it's wandered off, it's messy. Yeah, sure, like one goes missing, like you go find the one, but I don't know about joyfully. Right? Like maybe you give it a stern talking to or something like that. We used to have a dog. We've had 2 Mastiffs, and our first Mastiff was a dog named Dallas. And when our 4th kid was born, Dallas was a great dog, but for whatever reason, when our 4th child, when my son Dalton was born, Dallas, 120-pound Mastiff, decided to start squeezing underneath our chain link fence and running away in the neighborhood. And I don't know why. She just decided, you know what? I'm out. And every time we let her outside, she'd squeeze under this fence and she'd just go running just forever. And one night, it was time to go to bed, and I let Dallas out to go use the bathroom, and then I came back to check the door, and she was gone. She was gone. And I was so frustrated, and I turned around to my wife, and I said, you know what? She can go. She could go. I'm done with it. I'm not going to get her. To which my wife said, well, then you can be the one to tell our kids why they don't have a dog anymore. And you can be certain that I went and found that dog. And when I did, I picked her up and I set her in the seat, and the whole way back home, I gave her a stern talking to. I said, don't you dare, ever, Dallas, I'm so tired of it. And then the next night, she ran away again. So it didn't work really well. So now in this part of the story, as Jesus is telling it, like it probably starts to take a little bit different of a turn for people because they're like, joyfully puts it up on his shoulders? Like, that's a little much. I mean, you go find it, but I don't know about joyfully. Yeah, sure, you're relieved to find the sheep, but, and yeah, you'd go home, but joyfully, you start to feel people kind of like be challenged maybe. And then Jesus takes the story to the next level, and he says this in verse 6. It says, then when he, the shepherd, arrives back home, right? It says, and he will call together his friends and his neighbors, saying, rejoice with me because I have found my lost sheep. Now, everybody in the audience is like, no, that's not how this would work, Jesus. But see, Jesus is using hyperbole in order to begin really making his point. You see, I can picture the listeners, they began to chuckle a little bit, kind of like we are, because Jesus is making a bigger deal about this than a real shepherd would make about this. Like, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. Right? He says that, and perhaps he got animated like I did, and people in the audience are like, what? Come on, Jesus. All right. You get a little carried away there. You don't have a party for a lost sheep, Jesus. And yet maybe that's Jesus' point. You do when it matters. You see, let's be honest about this for a second, right? When we find something that is lost, you definitely feel good, right? You at least feel better about it than you did before it was lost. And you definitely feel good about it when you find it when it matters. See, here's at least what some of Jesus' point in the story is that when we lose something of value, we will focus on what is lost to the neglect of that which is not lost. Right? When we lose something of value, we focus on what's lost to the neglect of what is not lost. I'll give you some quick examples of how I know this is true. Right now, you have no emotion attached to your wallet. But if all of a sudden after service you look down and that wallet was missing, you'd say, these church people. Right? All of a sudden there would be some real emotion attached to that wallet. And then when you're able to go and you find it, right, you'd feel good about it. Right, like I've told you that we have 4 kids, and at some point in time, parents, I know you got to be with me. At some point in time, I've lost every one of our 4 kids. And I remember one time in particular, our third child, KJ, had just been born, and our third child, Berkeley, had just been born. See, I can't even get their names right. Our third child, Berkeley, had just been born, and we were taking care of her, and I was taking care of our oldest, and then all of a sudden we realized KJ, our middle one, she was missing. And we had all the safety things on the door and everything. So we're running around the house. We knew she was in the house. We're running upstairs, the middle floor, downstairs. We're calling for her. We can't find her anywhere. Finally, I'm like, she's got to be outside. Maybe. I don't know how she got out there, but she's got to be outside. I run outside, and there's just no shame. And I'm yelling for KJ, and I hear her crying around the corner of the house. And so me and my wife, we run over there, and we're comforting KJ outside of the house, and we realize nobody knows where the other 2 are. But that's because KJ was missing, right? We will find when there is something of value, we will focus on what is lost to the neglect of the unlost. And Jesus' audience, they get this. When we put this into context, we get this. And so Jesus goes on and he closes out his story in verse 7. And he says this, in the same way, there's more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over the 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. See, and there's the punchline. You see, because up until this moment, up until this point, everyone in the crowd probably agrees with Jesus about his metaphor and the points that he's made. But now he goes and he says something offensive, at least to the religious people who are sitting there, which really most often means that it's something we need to think about. You see, because the Pharisees and the religious leaders who are there, they think that God probably thinks about them all of the time, and they hear Jesus say this, and they're like, whoa, Jesus, what are you saying? Are you saying that God is more interested in him? Maybe points to a sinner or a tax collector like in the crowd. Are you saying that he cares more about him than he does about me, who tries to do everything right? I mean, are you saying he cares more about her or him? I mean, come on, that guy, he's not even trying. She's way gone. I mean, he's just an extra. But not to Jesus. To Jesus, every person matters. And every person's story is absolutely worth it. And here's the thing, and this is so incredibly important. What's true of Jesus privately has to be true of us as a church collectively. Every person's story matters. See, one of the definitions of the word anthology is a collection of stories written by one author. And that's who we are. A community of imperfect people made up of different stories from all kinds of different backgrounds and all kinds of different chapters. And we believe that every person's story matters deeply. And we also believe that the best chapters of your story are found when we reconnect our story to Jesus. See, it's my belief that even good stories fall incomplete when not connected to Jesus. See, with Jesus, your story takes on new depth, new hope, new joy, and new purpose. And that's why we're here. It's not to pressure you, but to invite you to the kind of life that God had designed you for. And so here's what our invitation is. This is what I'm asking. This is Launch Sunday, and we're all brand new here together. And so my request to you is, will you try 5? Will you give us 5 weeks where you come back on Sunday morning and bring someone with you, invite them to come with you? Maybe you feel disconnected. Maybe all of this is new. Maybe it is a miracle that you were even willing to step into a church this morning. Maybe it's been a long time since you've thought about God. But I'm so glad that you're here. Because at Anthology, we believe disconnected doesn't mean done. Your story isn't over. You have chapters ahead, and I believe Jesus helps make sense of where you have been and gives you purpose to what's next. So will you give us a chance to get to know you and would you take the time to get to know us? And what I think you will see, what I hope you will see, is that the best part of your story lies ahead when you let Jesus begin writing the chapters. And so here's what this means for us as a church. It's that we will try anything outside of sinning against God to reach anyone who is disconnected from God. That together, collectively, as a church, we need to be a church who will do whatever it takes to find the one that's disconnected and help reconnect them to the story of Jesus, to help the one lost get home. You see, and what's really cool about this section of teaching from Jesus is he finishes this one story and he moves immediately into another one about a lost coin. And then he finishes off that story by telling maybe the most popular story that Jesus ever told, a story about a lost son who decides to come home. And in all 3 stories, when that lost thing is found, it says the same exact thing, that there is rejoicing, there is partying, and that there is celebrating. And at the end, when Jesus closes out these stories, it is crystal clear what Jesus is talking about. Jesus isn't talking about a lost sheep. He's not talking about a lost coin. He's talking about us. He's talking about the lost coming home. He's talking about anyone who is disconnected from God. And Jesus' main concern is not what got us where we are. His main concern is helping them come home. I want you to notice something else about verse 5 in Luke 15. It says this, and when he has found it, right? So when that shepherd has found it. But what we're clear of at this point in time is it's not a shepherd we're talking about, it's Jesus. And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. I want you to notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say, and when he has found it, he gave it a stern talking to and made sure that he'll never go there again. It doesn't say, and when he has found it, he pinned it down and he scrubbed that thing until it was clean and then he could take him home. And it says, when he has found it, he joyfully puts it up on his shoulders and goes home. Some of you in here this morning, you hear the story and you're here because you hurt and you know that something is missing. You've tried all kinds of different things, but nothing is working, and you realize and you begin to think, maybe what I'm missing is God. But the question you begin to wonder after that is, but is God missing me? I'm telling you, God wants you to come home. Not to give you a stern talking to, but so that there can be rejoicing. So there can be a party. And that's the kind of church we're building at Anthology, where we celebrate and hoot and holler every time someone takes even a step back towards Jesus. Because that's exactly what heaven does. This is not a place for judgment, but for joy. It's why we clap, it's why we cheer, it's why we party at baptisms, because we believe every single homecoming is worth celebrating. One of the things that I think is really cool about just life in general, about stories, about metaphors, is every once in a while I believe God lets us see just a little bit, like just a little glimpse of what heaven's going to be like through events that happen in life. I'm a big sports guy. I love sports. I've loved, but if I had to pick a favorite sport, I'd pick baseball. Go O's. Nothing like rooting for a high school team playing in the majors, right? Glutton for punishment. But anyways, I love baseball. And I think one time, God let us get just a little glimpse of heaven through a guy named David Bodie. Now, for Nats fans in the room, this might be a little bit sour for you, but bear with me. A guy named David Bodie was on the Chicago Cubs, and originally he was cut at the beginning of the year, and he had kind of a tumultuous major league career. But eventually, injuries got him back up onto the roster. And he got the opportunity to step up to the plate without much experience, and he's found himself batting in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs, 2 strikes, bases loaded, and they were down by 3. No pressure. And the pitcher threw a pitch in, and David Bodie decided to swing. And he connected, and he hit every little boy's dream, hitting what's called the ultimate grand slam. And all of a sudden, the Cubs were winning. He ran out around the bases, and I watched the replay over and over and over again, and I got chills, I got goosebumps watching the video. And then all of a sudden, I came across this picture. David Bodie rounding third, coming home. You see, there's something magical about this picture. There's something inspiring about this picture, and I can't help but think that this is what God looks like and heaven looks like when one of his lost children decide to come home. It's why we hoot and holler and clap and celebrate every time someone decides to get baptized. And some of you are sitting in here in this room this morning and you're too afraid to turn back to God because you're afraid of what his reaction might be or what the reaction of other people might be, but it isn't the case at all. Jesus says that there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Listen, I do not know what you have gone through. I do not know what sin you have in your life. I do not know what a brokenness you have as part of your story. I do not know what pain you are carrying, but I do know that whatever it is often feels like you're in the bottom of the ninth and you need a miracle to survive. That miracle is Jesus. And you will find the best parts of your story when you let him start calling the shots and write the remaining chapters. Our story gets better when we let Jesus write our next chapters. And we would love nothing more as a church than to help you reconnect your story to Jesus. Will you pray with me? God, we love you. God, thank you so much. God, thank you for these stories. God, thank you that Jesus loved so much taking your truths and helping us understand them through stories. God, because we can all relate to stories. We all have a story. And so, God, we pray God, I pray that right now, whoever is sitting in this room and they need that hope and that joy and that purpose that only you provide, God, I pray that you will help them see that you're not waiting around to give them some stern talking to, or God, you are just waiting to celebrate the fact that they're here. God, and that they are beginning a journey to come back home to you. God, help us to connect with each other. God, and no matter what the life of this church looks like, God, I pray that the story that gets told is that this was a place to help reconnect people to the great story that you are trying to tell. We love you, we trust you, and thank you. It's in your Son's holy and awesome name we pray. Amen.